political diplomacy is needed between the continent's electoral bodies and their respective governments to ensure that guidelines and principles for safeguarding electoral integrity in a digital age is implemented. These were the remarks of the IEC CEO, Simon Mabulo, at the two-day validation workshop, which is currently underway in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. 15 election management bodies have converged at the African Union headquarters to draft rules to be used for the digital and social media elections in Africa. The IEC has been tasked with facilitating this process. For more on this, we now speak to Natasha, Phiri, who's joining us from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Natasha, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. So what exactly is it that they're trying to achieve with this workshop?
Well, thank you so much, Elgin, and of course to our SABC viewers. Well, the whole aim of this workshop is that coming out of today, which is the last day, guidelines will be set up by the AAEA, and then these guidelines will then be taken to the General Assembly of the AU, of which we're actually currently situated, and possibly adopted so that, all these electoral bodies across the African continent could actually adopt them as guidelines. And this is as they prepare for their various elections. You would know, for those who don't know, perhaps, Elgin, is that it's not only a critical year for South Africans next year as they head to the polls, but 19 other countries on the African continent will also be heading to the polls. And hopefully the aim and the hope is that by the time these countries actually go to these elections, these other guidelines are actually adopted. We've heard various stakeholders today giving further inputs, and I'm actually joined by a very interesting guest. Very young. She's a parliamentarian in Tanzania, and her name is Neema Lugangira. Neema, thank you so much for joining us on SABC News.
Thank you so much for having me.
You made very meaningful inputs here. You raised the whole issue of, females in politics, not only females in politics, but a journalist as well in politics, and how you face abuse, at the hands of social media and some of these users. Just tell us about your personal experiences, how it has been.
First of all, I would like to really commend the Association of African Election Authorities, as well as the South African election body, for coming up with this intervention, because it's a very timely one. As we all know, in today's world, democracy and digital are intertwined. You cannot separate digital from democracy. And with that, it has created lots of good opportunities, but also bad opportunities, in the sense that the online space has been ungoverned for so long. So people have been free to behave in manners in which offline they would not behave. Now, over time, that has created a huge issue, particularly also for politicians and women politicians specifically. Why am I saying this? Because you find a female parliamentarian, you may go online, share about your work, and then people will jump on you and not focus on the issue that you've raised, but they end up sexualizing you, analyzing how you're looking, how you're dressing, and making assumptions on how you even got to your parliamentary
And they actually don't criticize the work, they actually attack you personally.
So the issue that I, for one, am very grateful to being a member of parliament and to have gotten this invitation as the chairperson of the African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance, which is bringing together members of parliament from different African states to see what can we do in this digital development as parliamentarians. Now, you spoke about the critique. The issue is criticize me, criticize my colleagues on the agenda. But when you shift from the agenda to gender, that is no longer criticism. Now, unfortunately, on the social media space, on the platforms, that difference is not clear. So everybody hides behind the blankets of freedom of expression, that I'm expressing my freedom. But we are saying there's an end to freedom of expression. You should not use your freedom of expression to make me not use my freedom of expression. And the impact of this is in two folds. Number one, it's making women parliamentarians self-censor. I'm sure you can check in South Africa how many women parliamentarians are online. You'll find that the number is bare minimum. And the majority, why should they be online and put put themselves through abuse and all kinds of maltreatment just because they're women. So what we're trying to say that with these guidelines, it is crucial for the issue of women in politics to be clearly outlined in the guidelines, and also the social media platforms to have a responsibility and accountability. And through that process, we can create digital resilience for women parliamentarians, but also that is in a way of, today you're in the news, tomorrow you might want to get into politics. If you do not see women who you can aspire to be like, because we're not online, then how are we going to strengthen our democracy in Africa?
Just briefly, before we toss back to my colleague Elgin in studio, tell us about your experience. I mean, it was sad hearing about your experience, how you got attacked on social media. You couldn't even eat for 2 days.
So basically, as strong as we are, and in our African context, our African culture, the harmfulness of social media abuse goes beyond what one can comprehend. So take, for example, I shared my experience that there was a time I took a photo with an elderly man. It was actually outside our parliament. And you can tell that this is our parliament door. And I think about a week later, I made a contribution in Parliament talking about the importance of nutrition and the link that nutrition has to impotence, and pushing the government that they need to look at the link of this and seeing how our youth, what types of food are they eating, etc. Immediately as I made that contribution in Parliament, people went to take that photo that I took with the elderly man, who's very reputable, and started saying, yeah, no wonder you're talking about impotence because of young men. Do you know, and are you even with young men? You're busy running around with old men. And it went everywhere, and the abuses were all kinds of things. This is how we're sending women in Parliament. This is what they're doing, and all that, all sorts of things. Now, it's not true. First of all, I was so scared for the old man because he's a reputable old man, and I was feeling like so bad that I am as a result of his abuse. But then second, the women who voted for me back home in my region, in the villages, when they see that or read that through what are they going to think? How am I going to defend myself to everybody? But one thing that I thank the man is I called him to apologize, like, I'm so sorry for what's happening. And he told me that now you need to make sure every session you're in Parliament, you speak and you make it proper. Because much as it's bad, but you make the bad be good. So that also helped me, but not everybody can do that because it takes a lot. It was even to a point that my kids asked me, like, do you have to be on social media? Do you have to be on social media? Like, why are you on social media? So the impact is beyond,
Neema, thank you so much for your contributions, and hopefully these guidelines will be adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Aldrin, you've heard it there from a member of parliament in Tanzania, Neema Lugangira, not only sharing her harrowing experiences of social media abuse, but of course, her contributions that she actually made here. And of course, these contributions will be then drafted into guidelines, then sent to the General Assembly of the African Union, adopted, then distributed throughout, all these countries, African states. And hopefully, our electoral management bodies can then enforce them in their various conferences. In the various countries. As I said, this is the last day of the 2-day validation workshop here in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. And of course, as SABC News, we will be giving more interviews here in the heart of Ethiopia. With that said, it's back to you in studio.
Thank you so much.